I work for a business called Tomorrow Man. I'm going to try and run this a little bit differently to the three gents this morning. And I'm just going to try to make it a bit active. So heads up, you will be leaving your table and you will be talking to people that you maybe don't know. So have a bit of fun with it. See how it goes. I just really quickly want to give a reason as to why we kind of started this organisation, Tomorrow Man. So I grew up down in the Mornington Peninsula. Was pretty lucky, grew up on the beach. But for me, I kind of had an aspect of masculinity role model to me that didn't really land. It didn't sit, it didn't fit well. I was saying to the guys last night, my old man was a pretty stoic bloke. Never really told me he loved me, showed it in different ways. Coached my basketball team from the time I was in grade 3. I'm 32 now, still coaches my basketball team. He coached last night, I didn't play. But that's how he kind of showed his love and affection for me. Didn't really know how to have conversations. And I think for me, I was very lucky at the age of about 16 to run into a bloke named Jim Steins who played for the Melbourne Football Club. And for those that don't know Jim, he is a 6'6" monster, or was a 6'6" monster. He was a machine on the footy field, he was a machine in the business world. But at the age of 16, Jim became like a second dad to me. I was doing a little bit of work with him, and the one thing that I respected the most about Jim is that he would sit down with us and he would talk about the issues that he was having at home with his wife Sam. And he'd be emotional about it, the fact that he felt like he wasn't at home enough and he wasn't able to kind of be there as a dad and as a partner, and he felt like he wasn't able to really contribute the way he wanted to. And he'd talk through his emotion, he'd talk through his tears. And within a couple of minutes, he'd be like, but Belly, what do you got going on? What do you need? How's work? How's this? And he'd flip it. And it was the first time that I'd seen kind of both sides of the coin of masculinity. I didn't really know that existed. Growing up on the peninsula, it's a very insular kind of environment, as I'm sure it is for a lot of you out there. So for me, Jim became this real figurehead in terms of there's got to be other ways out there. So I couldn't wait to get off the peninsula. Turned 18, booted, spent a lot of time travelling. But we started this business called Tomorrow Man, simply out of a demand, really. I'm not going to focus on this stuff much. You don't really care about it. It's online. You can find it, so it's a bit boring, whatever. But the places we work is the exciting thing. I'm lucky enough to work in 3 streams. So we work in the education system, whether it's secondary schools, kind of year 10 and up, TAFEs and uni. Work in a bunch of sports clubs, professional amateur sports clubs, and then in the workplace with male-dominated workplaces. So blue collar, white collar, and yeah, very, very lucky to be kind of what I consider to be doing some really kind of on-the-ground work, which is really lucky. For today, this is where we're going to get a bit different. I think like these guys spoke about what it means, what's kind of going on for blokes around. I'm just going to run this little portion a little bit more around the art of communication, because I think if there's one place we're falling short for blokes, it's in the art of communication. We're not great at having conversations. We're not great at creating environments where conversations take place either. So in a second, I'm going to get you to jump up, and you just need to find... If you want to take your notepad, but like leave the rest of your shit alone. You don't need it. Just find a seat. Doesn't matter if you're on a table or not, but I just need you to sit opposite somebody, okay? Someone you didn't come with today. Just so, up on your feet, find someone you didn't come with today and just sit opposite for me. You'll need an A and a B. A, B, pretty simple. Picked it, great. Nice. A's, if you can put your hand up for me. All the A's, awesome work. So here's what's going to happen. B's, you're going to go first because often A's are a bit dominant. So B's, this is what's going to happen. If you're a B, you are going to ask partner A a simple question. How are you? Okay? Partner A, you're going to answer that question for 2 minutes uninterrupted. Okay? So partner B, you're going to want to talk, but you can't, all right? Just zip it. No talking at all. I'm just going to explain to you what's going to happen here so that you're kind of aware of it. For the first 30 seconds, you'll probably nail this. You'll be like, oh yeah, I'm good, work's good, life's good. And then everyone's going to start to do this. They're going to turn to me and go, holy shit, how long we got to go? All right? That's what's going to happen. When you hit that point, that's where you need to start really having to think about how you are, and you'll probably start to find a little bit of depth in the conversation. But to make it pretty obvious, the first 30 seconds will be easy, and then you're going to struggle a little bit, okay? So, partner B, you're asking the question how you are. Partner A, you're answering. I'm going to tell you when your 2 minutes is up. And remember, this is uninterrupted, so no talking back. So, take it away. It doesn't happen often where people give a round of applause. That doesn't happen, and I'm not sure who this guy up the back is, but when I said you've made it well done, I love this one. Very strong. Just quickly, we'd love to hear maybe one or two comments. How did you find it? Just throw them out. Easy. Who said easy? Yeah, and why did you find it easy? You were listening? Okay. Yep. Did you struggle not to talk? Yeah, I looked at you. You were doing a lot of these ones. Yep, great. A couple of others. How else did you find it? Hard? Yeah. Why hard, mate? Yeah, so tough to talk about yourself, yeah. How long do you think that you lasted? 30 seconds. And then what did you do? Just look at me with distress? Yeah. Okay, great. Just a show of hands, for those that were talking, who struggled to fill the 2 minutes? Can I get a show of hands? Yep. And for those that were listening, who struggled not to talk? Yeah, great. So, couple of things with this. As people, we are experts at ping pong conversation. We're brilliant at starting to talk. I even found it this morning, like when Jace started talking, I was like, oh yeah, this is like this. And I wanted to jump in and have a chat about it. We're experts at going, oh yeah, you've said something that relates to me. Now I'm going to say my piece so that you can hear that. And then when that relates to you, you'll say your piece. And the conversation goes like this. Very, very seldom do we get the chance to have a conversation where it's fill the 2 minutes on how you are. So the idea about that is just finding that little bit of depth. Now, I'm not saying that when you leave this room and you meet someone or at the networking lunch that you go, yeah, how are you? And then you wait for 2 minutes, okay? It's not going to work. It's really going to fail. But it is about giving the space for the kind of communication to take place. So we're going to flip it over. Partner A, you're going to do the asking of the question. The one thing I will say is often, as people, because we're used to this ping pong conversation, partner B, you will be inclined to talk about things that partner A spoke about. It's just natural, okay? What I want you to try and do is just try and talk about actually how you are. So try and find how you are rather than talking about things that they spoke about. Almost take it like it's a completely new thing, you haven't done this, and just see how you go. So 2 minutes, flipping it over, ask the question and your time starts now. So what I'm going to do now, because I just heard down here, it's a long 2 minutes. What I'm going to give you the chance, because it is a little bit unfair that you don't get a chance to kind of respond to what you hear. So I'm just going to give you 1 minute, just in a pair. Just feel free to back and forth. But if you want to ask any questions, if you want to find anything else out, you can have 1 minute just to kind of debrief it in your pair. Just debrief how that experience was. So I'll give you 1 minute in your pair just to debrief it together. Okay, nice work. So, hello, bring it back this way, there you go. This is good. They say, I don't know whether, there's a really interesting thing that happens globally when you get people talking. So if you're in North America and you're at a conference speaking and you say, all right, so we're going to kick back up the front, everyone just instantly just shuts up and turns around and looks at you. When you're in Europe and you say, all right, everyone back up the front, normally people kind of chat for like 10 seconds and then they kind of pay attention. You know, they wrap that sentence and come back. When you do it in Australia, everyone may as well just go, yeah. Like, no one gives a shit. It's like, mate, I'm in conversation here. Can't you see that? So yeah, thanks for coming back. Just quickly, I'd love to hear from maybe a couple of people. What's the value in that spend of time, in that 5 minutes of conversation, which, yes, a lot of it is one-way conversation, but what do you think's the value in that spend of time?
So deep.
Yeah?
So quickly, so deep.
So quickly, so deep. And,
I met this person for the first time and I know about his home life.
yeah, so you've met someone for the first time and you know about their home life and what's going on. Yep, absolutely. What was your name, sorry? Robin. Thanks, Robin. A couple of others. Yes, up the back. Yeah, it's an honest connection. Yeah, and what makes it an honest connection, do you think? Yep, so the openness... Yeah, great. Next to?
Just be able to relate to someone from any walk of life that you're like the same problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So finding that commonality between one another. Yeah, great. Last two, yep, and then yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And what is that element of risk? Yeah, entirely. It's exposing, it's risk reward, absolutely. And last one was hand.
It's about that when you're not thinking about what you have to say.
Yes. Yeah. The listening to think and then you're not actually listening, whereas here you can be a little bit more present in the moment.
Yeah, it's just that I just felt I was really listening.
Really listening. Yeah, great. It's I think the honesty and the depth, we often use the analogy of talking with a bit of gravity or a bit of weight. And the best way to kind of describe that is often when we have conversations as people, it's very surface level. It's like a rock skimming along the surface. It just bounces from topic to topic to topic. So often you'll hear people, you might be like, oh yeah, so who's in your family? And someone says, oh, I've got like 10 brothers and sisters. And then the next question goes to, yeah, what do you like to do on the weekend? And it's like, if someone has 10 brothers and sisters, there's an amazing story there, but we don't often find the depth. So for a lot of the work that we're trying to deliver at the moment, it's about finding that depth. It's about, instead of that rock skimming along the surface, it's dropping to find a bit of depth. It's looking for quality over quantity. And I think that's what this piece does, is it gives you an insight into someone that you don't know. It tells you about their family life, and it can be a bit exposing, but there is a risk and reward that kind of goes with it, and it builds bonds. Often, for males, we're not great at doing that. We're not great at kind of opening up and finding those places unless you've had 6 beers. And then it kind of comes with a heap of remorse the next day. But the reality of it is, once places like this are kind of created, it's often enjoyed. Just out of curiosity, who enjoyed that 5-minute spend of time? Can I just get a show of hands? Yeah. And you can learn something about someone in 2 minutes that, maybe you couldn't have learnt without that time. I always talk about the fact that, and I don't know whether anyone else has done this, but where I've got in a taxi or in an Uber, and I've got in and I've said, yeah, I'm good, how are you? And then I've realised that he hasn't even asked me how I am. And I'm like, I'm clearly not listening, not present. But that's often the way we operate. So it's trying to find ways that we can look at, all right, as blokes, how do we have these conversations? So just before we kind of get into, I'm sure this is going to be pretty easy, so just throw them out. But what is the stereotype of an Aussie male these days, or a male that lives in Australia? What's a stereotype? Just throw them all out. Tough. Oh, I could not, there was...
I said
Stoic, yep, absolutely. Tattoos. Yep, what else? Beer drinker. Yeah. Yeah, that's Tony. Yeah. Tony will be signing autographs later on. That's great. Yep, couple of others. What else fits the stereotype of a typical bloke? Invincible, sporty, silent, breadwinner. Great. So here's the thing. I'm just going to show you a clip. Now, we teamed up with Movember and Triple M last year to do a piece around masculinity. And pretty simple. We spent a bunch of time with some kids. These are just kids from middle-class families. But it was really interesting just listening to them talk about what it means to be a man. So have a quick listen.
You have to be old and a grown-up.
What do you notice when you watch that? What are the things that kind of stand out most?
They're all reflecting on their dad.
They're all, yeah. Yeah. So they're all reflecting on their dad and what's kind of, yep, absolutely. What else?
One of those dads gives good hugs.
Yeah, does it? Do you know it took me like 4 times watching that before I could understand what that kid said? I was like, what's he saying? Yeah, he does give good hugs, absolutely. Anything else that you noticed? Yep. When we talk about the stereotype, it kind of reflects it pretty much. Yeah, absolutely. Anything? It's all doing? Yeah. Okay, and what do you mean by that? Yeah. 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 It's That's what he does. Yeah, great. Yeah, it's really good. Was there any girls? No. They did it deliberately, so they asked young boys like, yeah. But there's that one boy who knows heaps about girls, so that's good. Yeah, he is. But he'll have a good hairstyle. So I guess the interesting thing with this is like, for young blokes, I think you're 100% right. They reflect what it is that they see from their dad. And for the male stereotype in this country, it's a pretty archaic idea of what it means to be a man. It's still really rooted in a lot of the agricultural times and the industrial man, but it's not really relevant for a man of today. It's not going to be relevant for the blokes of tomorrow. And unfortunately, for these young blokes, what they're having role model to them is often from their parents, and it's not actually going to serve them. So I think for the reality of what we need to be doing for young blokes these days is looking at how can we deconstruct the idea of what this man is. It's pretty archaic, but how can we deconstruct that and reinvent it as a term of masculinity that works for these blokes now, so that they have the capability to have the conversations, so that they have the capability when they're 12 years old and know that, you know, they're a gay man, that they're not too scared to tell their footy mates. They can have that conversation with their parents. How can we create a world where that kind of exists? And I really believe that it comes back to conversations and communication and fostering environments where young blokes can have those chats. Now, I believe there's a huge misconception out there and a huge myth that blokes don't know how to talk and don't want to talk. The reality of it is that we just don't have enough environments for it to happen, and we're not trained in it. So for a lot of us, like I said myself, growing up, my old man never taught me how to have those conversations. So I didn't know how to have them. And there's a generation coming through now that know a little bit more than my generation did, and I'm sure that your generation did. There's a generation of blokes, I was saying to the guys last night at dinner and to Jazz and Rachel, there's a generation of guys coming through now that are teaching their dads how to say I love you. And that's the first step. It's a great step. They're teaching their old man how to have that piece of communication. So when it comes, and this is where I think that it's a changing time. So as an example, 2 weeks ago, I was up in Avalon, about an hour north of Sydney on the northern beaches, and we ran what we called a blokes night. It was literally called a night with the blokes. It was put out to the local community. Now Avalon has had, over the last 18 to 20 months, they've had 3 suicides of young blokes between 15 and 20. So the community was in a bit of a crisis area. They didn't really know what was going on, so they put it out that we were going to run this night. Just called it Blokes Night, Night with the Blokes. And they were hoping to get 100 blokes rock up in this room. 7 o'clock rolls around. There was 250 people in the door for a 7 o'clock start. And the youngest guy in the room was 15, the oldest guy in the room was 75, and these blokes came in going, we need to change because what's happening right now in our community isn't serving us. So we're at I really believe we're at the precipice of some change for guys in Australia. We're realising that we're falling short, and we're falling short in many areas, and there is this real kickback going, well, we need to do something, and it comes back to this element of communication. So I'm sure a lot of these stats you're going to know, but I'm just going to run you through a few stats that kind of exist. Now, these are mainly stats for guys 15 to 24. But what I want to do is, as I go through these, really simple. If you relate to one of these stats, or if 1 degree of separation, you know a guy that relates to one of these stats or fits one of these stats, all I want you to do is just put your hand up. Okay. Now, at the end of this, I'm going to ask which stat stood out and maybe the reason why. But I just want you to take note of how many hands go up for some of these. So the first one. In schools, boys make up 90% of kids with a behavioural problem. So if when you were at school, you were that kid, or that's your son, or whatever it is, you'd put your hand up. Great. Simple. That's as easy as it is. Over 80% of violent crimes are committed by men. So if you know a bloke who's committed a violent crime, you throw your hand up. 1 out of every 8 Australian men suffers from depression at any given time. 1 out of every 5 Australian men suffers from anxiety at any given time. Suffering from depression leads to serious health disorders in men, the main 3 being diabetes, heart disease, and suicide. Men are 3 times more likely than women to suffer the worst possible outcome of depression, which is suicide. You don't need to put your hand up for this one, but suicide's the largest killer of males aged 15 to 44. At the moment, it's 7 men a day in Australia are taking their own life, which is incredibly frightening. I just skipped through. I don't know how that happened. It's estimated that about 45% of Western men are unhappy with their body. So if you as a man has ever been unhappy with your body, or you know a bloke who has, throw your hand up. And I believe that this rate is way higher than 45. Men of all ages are more likely to smoke, drink, and be overweight and have a poor diet compared to women. So if you know a bloke that fits that. 9 out of every 10 people in prison are male. So if you know a bloke that's been to prison, or juvie even, throw juvie in there. This one's pretty confronting. 1 in 2, so 50% of Australian men feel they have no close friends they could turn to if they needed help. That's 50% of Australian men. And these last 3. Why are you doing that? Go back. 1 in 3 men aged 30 to 65 have absolutely no social connections. None. Out of that 2 in 3, 1/3 of those men are not satisfied with the quality of those relationships. So just quickly, is there any stats in there that kind of stand out to you in particular? And for this workshop to work, the way I kind of want to roll it through is I'd love to hear from maybe 1 or 2 people just what your experience of one of those stats is. Yeah, great. What was your name? James.
Certainly the male suicide rate stands out for me. I made a very serious attempt on my life some 7 years ago, and I was very lucky to survive that. So I changed my life around and I became a counsellor, and I work with only men that are going through severe crisis situations. Family law court's one of the bigger things that we're going through in Australia. And although there is no hard statistic on the direct correlation between divorce and child custody issues, we think that there's a large part of those men that suffer from that, and that was my reason. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for your honesty on that. So they say this is a stat from last year when it was 6 men take their life every day. They say that 4 of those 6 men are triggered by, not caused by, relationship breakups that take their own life. So when you break that down, what it comes down to is that for blokes, we become so dependent on our partner. And as an example, like I'll just use myself as an example. Growing up, I was the most social kid in the world, was surrounded by friends. Finished school, continued with like all of my boys that I hung out with, played sport together, partied on the weekend. They say at about the age of 25, 26, you meet your life partner and your friendship circle shrinks a little bit then because you move in with your partner, you know, all that kind of thing. They say the real issue for blokes, though, is when you have a child. So when you have a child, you go to work, you work your little ass off, you go home to be a dad or a partner and be with your family, and on the weekend you spend your time with your family. And so your friendship group gets even smaller. Now I've got an 11-month-old. I haven't seen my friends in 11 months. My weekends are dedicated to my family because it's the most amazing thing in the entire world, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But for my partner, she, as soon as my little one Tavi was born, she was put into a mother's group. She's got like 10 new friends. She hangs out with them all the time. She just started going to music class. She just sent me a photo then. She's at music class with all these girls having coffee, and she's got all these people around her. So for blokes, unfortunately, we don't really know how to have those social connections as things progress. Now, I know that my partner Jen has just gone back to work a few days a week and is absolutely loving using her brain in that element, which is so great for her. But I think there is something to be said about why don't we have social connections? Why do we lose them? But yeah, thanks for your honesty. The reason why, and I'm going to give you a bit of context. So we use these stats working with men all the time. Now, I'm guessing for the majority of the people in this room, this stuff doesn't surprise you. I'm sure that you know a lot about it. You're active in it. But for a group of of, say, 16-year-old boys in a high school that haven't been exposed to a whole lot of stuff, this kind of stuff really lands. And you can feel the energy change in the room from the kind of like high positive laughter and the giggles that were taking place and the learning about each other to people going, oh shit, it's a bit more real. And when that happens for young people, it also triggers an element of honesty in the room. So I'm going to move into this next piece, which I would normally do, just do with a huge piece of tape down the middle of the room. But for this, I'm just going to get you to stand up where you are. Stay sitting down now, but that was bad instructions on my behalf. I get you. Right, yeah. So the way this is going to work is I'm just going to throw out a bunch of questions. And all I want you to do is I'll say stand up if, and then if you relate to that question, I'm just going to get you to stand up where you are. And then I'll follow it up with a stay standing if, and if you agree with it, you'd stay standing. If you disagree, you'll just sit down. Okay? It's pretty simple. The reason why this is effective, and especially for blokes, is blokes are great at non-verbal communication. Brilliant at it, in fact. So this makes it a little bit easier, especially when you're working with a group of lads that are maybe a bit younger and a bit out of control. So first one. Stand up if you have someone in your life that you look up to, a mentor. So stand up if you have a mentor in your life, someone that you look up to. And stay standing if you tell that person that you look up to them. So if that person's very aware that you look up to them, stay standing. Great. And everybody take a seat. Stand up if you have ever been really proud of the impact that some men have on the world. And bring it a little bit closer to home. Stay standing if you've ever been really proud of the impact that a certain man has had on your life. And stay standing if you were able to tell that man about the impact they had on your life. And everybody take a seat. Stand up if you have ever told a lie. And stay standing if you have ever told a lie that had some serious consequences. And stay standing if you were able to come clean to the person about that lie. And everybody take a seat. Stand up if you have ever been in love. And stay standing if you're currently in love. And stand up or stay standing if you have ever had your heart broken. So stand up or stay standing if you've ever had your heart broken. And stay standing if that moment when you had your heart broken, you found it hard to trust moving forward. And stay standing if you still find it a little bit hard to trust even now. And everybody take a seat. Stand up if you've ever been scared of your job before. And stay standing if you still get scared of your job. And everybody take a seat. Stand up if you tell your parents, if they're still around, or if when they were around, that you love them. And stay standing if they would say it back to you. And everybody take a seat. A couple more, you're doing really well. Stand up if you've had a moment in your life that you would consider a defining moment. So a moment in time where you went, right, things are going to be different from here on. Positive, negative, doesn't matter, but a defining moment. Stay standing if you talk about that moment openly with your friends and family. Stay standing if that moment would be something that you would be comfortable sharing with a room full of 100 people. And everybody take a seat. Last one. Stand up if you've ever cried. And stay standing if you would have cried at least once in the last 12 months. And stay standing if you would have cried at least once in the last 6 months. And stay standing if you would have cried at least once in the last 3 months. And stay standing if you would have cried at least once in the last month. And everybody take a seat. Brilliant work, nice stuff. We'd just love to hear from a couple of people. How did you find that? It was good. Yeah.
It's easy. You can just stand up. There's no words. You don't have to explain yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's easy, no words. You don't have to explain it. It's like, yep, done. Yep, great.
I checked that I wasn't there anyone.
Front of the stage, just looking over your shoulder. Just yep, absolutely.
It's like there's a certain strength in everyone's, a lot of people standing up together.
Yep.
You don't feel isolated. You don't feel alone.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that, was there a moment in this room when anyone, because I have a great view I can see, but was there a moment, what's your name, sorry mate? Trevor. Was there a moment for you, Trevor, where you were concerned that you may be one of the only people standing?
No, I felt strength, but that didn't define what I was doing.
Yeah, okay, great. Often, especially for younger guys, you hear that. It's like, I just thought I was going to be the only one. I was shitting myself. And then you look around and there's like all these people there, and it's like, I thought I was the only one going through that. Yeah, it's a great one. The strength behind it, yeah, really good. Yes? Yeah, great. Yeah, perfectly. So it's like, it's taking a bit of accountability and ownership, and you're doing it for you. Yep, brilliant.
I think one of the things I was thinking is if the room was a little bit different, if you could see it.
Yeah, so it's a great fact. On that, normally it would be ran with a piece of like masking tape down the middle of the room, 2 lines on either side, and I would say step to the line. So people would physically have to walk out to stand on the line. And often you see something like this happen, where the question may be asked, let's say in a high school, if I was to ask the question, step out if you've ever questioned your own sexuality. Often no one moves, and there's just like real nervousness, and then one person goes and walks out, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, come and join it. But it is that idea of going, oh my God, like, am I going to? And it becomes a bit exposing, but it also brings the people with them. Yeah, great. So yeah, a good variation on it. Absolutely. In terms of this today, all I really wanted to focus on is a lot of the time, I just think a lot of the time we miss the fact that boys are very capable of having conversations. And I want to go back to a piece that I mentioned earlier about in Avalon with this 250 blokes in the room. There was this really profound moment where I was up the front, and the room's probably only about this size, really, but like 2.5 times the people. And there was a bloke standing on the kind of wall over the side, over to the left, and he just kept coming in really hot a lot of the time with just like one or two sentences. And at one point, he kind of yelled out, and he's like, "Yeah, you're right. We got to listen." And I was like, "All right, thanks, man. Like, gotcha." And then someone else had mentioned something about, oh, my dad didn't really teach me how to talk, so I didn't know how to talk. And he kind of pops up and he's like, "Yeah, we don't know how to talk." But he was coming in really hot, like really hot. And about 3/4 of the way through the night, he goes, "Oh, look, I wasn't going to say anything, but..." He goes, "But most of the blokes in this room know my story. 18 months ago, I lost my son, who was 20. And he goes, and then he really poetically took us through the 2 weeks leading up to losing his son. And he said a couple of really profound things that really stood out to me. One was that he said, my boy was trying to tell me that he wasn't okay, and I wasn't picking up the breadcrumbs he was dropping because I was never taught how to find them. Which I just thought was a really profound way of looking at it. He's like, I didn't actually know what I was meant to be looking for. The other thing he said was, I kept saying to my boy, mate, tomorrow's a new day, you'll be fine, you'll be all right, we'll get through it, you know. He knew he wasn't great, but he kept saying it, you'll be fine, mate, tomorrow's a new day. And then he said the line, he said, I was seeing the roses, all he could see was rocks. And I think that's it's a great way to look at it, because often we don't put a lens over what young people are seeing. And I say young people because that's our kind of core business is young people. But often we don't see the lens that young people are seeing the world through. And the idea of what it means to be a man is archaic, and it doesn't work for them. And it's up to us to kind of role model a different version of masculinity, or allow them to reinvent what it means to be a man. Find the things that land for them, find the things that work for them, and encourage that open communication. Because until we can start to role model it, those kids in that video, they're going to keep saying the same thing. And so it's up to us as fathers, as uncles, as friends, as males in the world. It's up to us to kind of show a different side of masculinity. So look, I'm really sorry that I've eaten into a bit of your lunch. I would like to keep talking. I do like a chat. But yeah, so thanks for your time. The other thing I will say is often, and I know this is a condensed version, but this is the last bit. Especially for guys, if you want to become smarter in the world, you read books, you research things on the internet, you can find ways of being smarter. If you want to get fit, you can exercise, you can go to the gym, you can work your muscles, and you can get fit. If you want to learn how to have hard conversations that are maybe kind of increase your heart rate, sweaty palms, have a bit of weight to the conversation, we don't really teach that anywhere. We don't teach that emotional muscle how to train. And that emotional muscle is just like a physical muscle. A physical muscle, if you go and you do a day at the gym on your arms, and unless we train and prepare for it and have that muscle ready and adapted and worked, then we're not going to be able to cope with it. So it starts at a young age, training that emotional muscle, teaching those elements of communication, so that these young blokes, as they grow up, they're ready for the world. They're ready to have conversations, and that they know how to support their mates. They know how to support their partners. They know how to support their friends, their family, their kids. Sorry, I'll get off. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.